Hello and welcome to Written Words and lesson 2, which is called Less is More. In this lesson we are going to explore what are intensifiers. Then we're going to look at how intensifiers can be counterproductive and alternative ways to intensify. So what are intensifiers? They are words, usually adverbs, that are used for emphasis. There are lots of them to choose from. Very, really, so, utterly, absolutely, rather, quite, pretty, awfully, fairly, incredibly, and so on. If something is very good, that means it's better than just good. It's upper level. If I'm so pleased to hear the news, it means that I'm more than just pleased. If a task is awfully difficult, that means it's harder than just difficult. It's a level further up the scale. Intensifiers are used a lot in speech. We use them a lot when we're talking. So it can be tempting to use lots of intensifiers when we're writing as well, to heighten the effect of adjectives and give them more value. Surely it's more effective to say really bad than just bad. However, if you think, for example, of a parent who shouts at their child all the time, the child gets used to that and the shouting doesn't have any effect. It loses its impact. In the same way, if a writer uses intensifiers too much, this can be counterproductive because they become commonplace and the reader just stops noticing them and skips over them. Not only do the intensifiers lose their effect, but too many of them can actually make the writing sound unprofessional and weaken its impact. Some adjectives can even sound wrong, verging on comical if they're used with intensifiers. Worst, for example, means that a thing is already as bad as it can get, so you can't get worse than worst. So if we say the absolute worst, the intensifier is pointless because something can't be worse than the worst. Dead is another good example. There are no degrees of deadness. Something is dead or it's not. Something can't be more dead than something else. So it's nonsensical to say really dead, for example. We came across a similar example when we were looking at our extract from A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, where he talked about deadest. Something can't be more dead than dead. So how can we add intensity to our writing effectively? First of all, there is the less is more method. If you simply read back through a piece of writing you've done and remove all the intensifiers, you might be surprised at how much more effective it becomes. Alternatively, try using other adjectives or other phrases instead. So instead of saying that a film was really good, you could say the film was amazing, or I loved the film. A piece of chocolate cake you could describe as really tasty, but you could improve that by saying perhaps that it was heavenly or the best thing you've ever tasted. Our extract for this lesson is taken from a very large book called A History of the World in 100 Objects by Neil McGregor. Neil McGregor, at the time of writing, was the director of the British Museum in London, and the book focuses on 100 objects in the museum and explains what each object can tell us about history. The extract that I've chosen for this lesson is from the first object, which is a wooden mummy case. And we're going to read two versions of the extract. The first one is the real one, as it actually appears in the book, and the second one has been slightly adapted by me. So the first one says this: when I first came through the doors of the British Museum in 1954, at the age of 8, I began with the mummies, and I think that's still where most people begin when they first visit. What fascinated me then were the mummies themselves, the thrilling, gruesome thought of the dead bodies. Today, when I cross the Great Court or climb the front steps, I still see groups of excited children heading for the Egyptian galleries to brave the terror and mystery of the mummies. Now I'm much more interested in the mummy cases, and although this one is by no means the oldest object in the museum, it seems a good place to begin this history through objects. And now let's look at a slightly altered version in which I've added some intensifiers. When I came through the doors of the British Museum for the very first time in 1954, at just 8 years old, I actually began with the mummies, and I genuinely think that's still where most people begin when they first visit. What seriously fascinated me then were the actual mummies themselves, and the incredibly thrilling and utterly gruesome thought of the dead bodies. Today, when I cross the Great Court or climb the front steps, I still see groups of really excited children heading for the Egyptian galleries to brave the truly frightening mummies. Now I'm much more interested in the mummy cases, and although this one is by no means the absolute oldest object in the museum, it seems quite a good place to begin this history through objects. Let's start our comparison of the two versions by counting the number of intensifiers. In the first extract, the original version from the book, I can see just one intensifier. He says, now I am much more interested in the mummy cases. So the much is an intensifier, but it's the only one. In the second version, I've sprinkled intensifiers all over the place. There is very, just, actually, genuinely, incredibly, seriously, utterly, actual, really, much, truly, absolute, and quite. There are lots of them. So what is the difference in the style? As I mentioned earlier, we tend to use intensifiers a lot when we're talking. So the second version of this extract uses a lot of intensifiers, making it sound very conversational. It sounds more as if Neil McGregor is sitting in the pub chatting with a friend rather than writing a serious work of non-fiction. The book is intended to sound serious. It's intended to be authoritative. And if we use a conversational tone, that undermines that to a certain extent, and it brings the level of seriousness down slightly. The first version sounds much more formal, much more scholarly, much more serious, while the second is conversational in tone rather than something you would expect to read in a book. So it's no surprise that there is only one intensifier in the first version. It's something that editors will look for as well when they're reading a piece of text. If they see that there are a lot of intensifiers, they will probably advise that you remove some or all of them. For our language focus for this lesson, we're going to have a brief look at word order. Word order is something that's very important in English, and it's quite a large topic, so it's something that we will come back to again in subsequent lessons. We've already talked about how intensifiers are adverbs, but with adverbs it's very important that you put them in the right place in the sentence, because changing its position can alter the meaning of the sentence. So we're just going to look at a few examples of how that might work. If we say, only the boy ate eggs for breakfast. Only is the adverb in the sentence. And only is in front of the boy in this sentence. So this means that no one else ate eggs for breakfast. Only the boy ate eggs for breakfast. No one else ate eggs for breakfast. If we move only to a different position, if we say the boy only ate eggs for breakfast, that means that the boy ate eggs for breakfast and nothing else. He didn't eat toast, he didn't eat cereal, he only ate eggs for breakfast. Then if we move it further along in the sentence again, if we say the boy ate eggs only for breakfast, that means that he ate eggs for breakfast, but not for any other meal. So you can see that just the tiny action of moving one little word only to a different place in the sentence changes the emphasis of the sentence and changes the meaning considerably. So it's very important to make sure that we put the adverb in the correct place. We put the adverb with the word that we want it to apply to. And now for our writing prompt. A friend has given you a very special gift and you want to say thank you. You want to write a thank you letter to your friend, thanking them for the gift. I'd like you to write the letter twice. First time, write the letter including as many intensifiers as you can think of. Pepper it all over with intensifiers. Then the second time, write the letter again, removing all the intensifiers and perhaps adjusting some of the words, putting in maybe some stronger adjectives or maybe some other phrases to make the impact more effective, but without the intensifiers. And then finally, compare the two versions. Which one do you prefer? Which one looks better? Which one looks more effective? Which one would you send to the friend? Thank you for joining me in this lesson. Do take a look at the worksheet that accompanies the lesson, which recaps all the things we've discussed, includes the extracts that we've read, and suggests some ideas for further reading. I look forward to joining you in the next lesson, and in the meantime, happy writing.